Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be looking at English language transactional writing. We're going to look at how to create an effective response for paper 2, question 5. If you haven't done so already, please could you like and subscribe, it really does help us out when you do so. The first thing I'd like to do is have a look at the information below and predict the actual focus of today's lesson. So we've got 80% of students use this every day. Many people refuse to use this service because they're often expensive, crowded or late. And the final one, this is one of the main causes of global warming. If you can stretch and challenge yourself as well, try and think for each of the examples we've just looked through, what language device has been used for each statement. By the end of the video, you'll be able to recall the key language devices for paper 2, understand how to approach question 5, and finally, apply your understanding to an exam style question. Look at the exam question and attempt the challenges that follow. So the question says then, cars are convenient, comfortable and save time. However, we need to use them less by making public transport such as trains, trams and buses cheaper, more reliable and easier to access. Write a speech to be given at a meeting of your local council in which you argue your point of view on this statement. So the first thing I want you to think about is the TAP. So what is the TAP of the exam question? If you're not too sure what we mean by this, we mean the topic, the audience and the purpose. And this is just going to allow you to break down your response to actually focus on the main things that you want to drill down upon in your exam response. Super challenge. I want you to think about what is the scope of the exam question. So with many of these questions, they're quite broad. So what specifically are the kind of things that you could speak about in your response? And then finally for the mega challenge, what kind of language devices would you need to respond to the exam question effectively? So think back to all your previous lessons, think back to any kind of language techniques that you know. How could you use them to apply it to this exam question? Class feedback. Check your understanding against the answers below. So for our challenge them, the topic is use cars less and use public transport more. The audience would be the local council, which would mean we'd have to speak in quite a formal tone. And then the purpose is going to be to express your own view on the topic. So you don't need to agree or disagree with the statement or anything like that. It's about vocalizing your own view on the topic. For the super challenge then, the pros of driving, having access to a car. Why do we need to use cars less? So e.g. the environment, money, congestion, danger. What are some of the negatives of public transport? So they're expensive, unreliable, and may not go to your destination or maybe far away from where you live, for example. Okay, so those are the kind of things that I would initially be thinking when I'm faced with this question. So that's what you kind of have to do in the exam. You've got to be really creative and really quick to really come up with those ideas so you're not spending a lot of time planning your response. Look at the acronym below. Work out the language technique that each of the letters represent. So this is a key acronym that you need to know for English, so it's DeForest. So if you're not too sure what we mean by these, try and use the clues below to try and figure out what these might be referring to. So these clues only cover the first few techniques. So for clue number 1, this is a question that doesn't require a verbal response. Clue number 2, this is where you have 3 words or phrases to support one point. And the final one, using a statement that is true and can be proven to be true. So if you want to pause the video here and go through it at your own time, please feel free to do so. We're now going to jump ahead and have a bit of feedback. Class feedback. Check your answers against the teachers. So here we have our DeForest Techniques. The first one, the D, is direct address. This is directly speaking to the audience. So normally when you use words like you or we or us. Now, if you have a slightly different idea of what this might be, it might be that you think it might be a discourse marker. That's absolutely fine. There's no right or wrong answer. These are just some of the good techniques you can use in your writing. The next one is alliteration. So this is where you repeat the same letter 2 or more times. A fact. So a fact is something that is true. Opinion, which is your own view or idea. Rhetorical question is a question that doesn't require an answer. Repetition, this is repeating a phrase 2 or more times. Emotive language, so these are words that get an emotional reaction from the audience. Statistic, this is essentially a fact with a number. It can be a percentage, it can be a fraction, it can be a decimal. Anytime they're using numerical data to prove a point, that will count as statistics in English. And the final one, a triplet. These are 3 words or phrases towards one idea. So for example, English is fun, exciting, and fills me with joy would be a typical one that you could use. Try and stretch and challenge yourself as well before we move on. Try and think, what other techniques can you remember? There are other techniques outside of the DeForest acronym, so if you can remember any, that'll be really helpful in your writing as well. Look at the example response and attempt the challenges that follow. So this is someone who's tried to respond to the same kind of response that we're thinking about in terms of the question that we've just looked at, and then here are the challenges. So we're going to read through the response and identifying any spelling or grammatical mistakes that they're making. Super challenge, try and identify where the student has used some language techniques. And the final one, write some feedback for the learner on how to improve. Consider what works well and what needs to be improved to gain more marks. So it says then, I agree with this statement. Cars are dangerous to the environment and we need to stop using them now before it's too late. Instead, we all should be using public transport a lot more. I think there's a simple solution. We need to lower the price of public transport and make it easier for everyone to use it. The first thing I want to talk about is, why is public transport so expensive? If we want people to start using cars so much, then we must make buses and trains more affordable. 90% of learners who go to college have to get some form of public transport. How would you feel if it was your son or daughter struggling to pay for all the money they have to pay just to get to their college? The second thing I want to bring up is, why do buses and trains never come on time? Last year, I was waiting for a bus for an hour and a half before it turned up. Then things only got worse when I got on the bus. There were no seats, someone was playing loud music, and don't even get me started on the smell. So if you want to pause the video here and go through it at your own time, please feel free to do so. We're now going to jump ahead and have a look at the feedback in the next part of the video. Class feedback. Check your answers against the teacher's ideas. So first things then, we're going to start off with the positive things then. So what went well? The student has started to use some language techniques in their writing. The learner has written in paragraphs. The writing has some good ideas that need to be developed in more detail. Now that for me, even though it's on the good side of the feedback, is an important one to focus on, because if you are coming up with some good ideas, make sure you expand on them, make sure you use your language techniques to fully actually get your message across, and to make sure you're hitting the desired word count for the assessment as well. Now in terms of EBI, so what needs to be improved, or even better if, the response hasn't begun like a speech and shows little awareness of the audience. So you have to remember, whatever form of writing you get, you need to respond appropriately to that. It started with, I agree with the statement. So it hasn't told us what the statement is. It hasn't actually addressed the fact that it's talking to people at the council or anything like that. It's just jumped straight in really. There are a number of errors of spelling, punctuation and grammar. Hopefully you were able to identify these when you look through them yourself. If not, it's a good idea to go back and double check it, because sometimes our mind makes these connections that aren't really there, and we kind of fill in the gaps when there's been a few obvious errors. The student uses informal language. So if you think back to the start of the lesson, we looked at the TAP and we clearly said that because it was a speech given to the local council, we need to use a more formal tone. The learner has used the wrong there, and they are. Now this is a really big error. This is something that most examiners are really going to flag up, and the more you do it incorrectly, the more harshly they're going to mark you, because this is considered quite a common mistake, so they're going to be looking out for things like that. The students need sequencing discourse markers to structure their response. So for example, if you have to write, let's say, 5 paragraphs in your response, use words like firstly, secondly, and thirdly to break down your paragraphs and actually give a sense that you actually planned out what you're trying to say, rather than just rambling on and on about whatever comes to your mind first. Now we're going to think about transactional writing, so here are some key things to remember. So in terms of gaining marks, we need to think about our language techniques. So let's say you've wrote your response, have a look back over it and consider, have you used a range of language techniques? Think about, what do we actually mean when we say a range of techniques, because that's quite an ambiguous phrase really. Structural techniques. Have you structured your writing appropriately? So has it used paragraphs? Have you varied your sentence structures as well? And then finally, for your SPAG, Have you used a range of sophisticated spelling, grammar, and punctuation? Using things such as just a full stop, a comma, and a question mark, even though these are really good forms of punctuation, they're still fairly basic. So you need to show us that you know how to use a range of punctuation, as well as having good spelling and grammar as well. Now we're going to talk about a fail and a sail attempt. Now this is particularly important if you're going to have a go at a response, get it marked by either myself or another teacher, and then try and build upon that feedback, okay? So your fail attempt, this is your first attempt in learning, so this isn't going to be perfect, okay? We just need to accept that. A lot of the time, especially with English, people feel a little bit self-conscious when they're actually giving their work, but you shouldn't feel bad about it. Everyone's learning, everyone's on that journey, so you should look at it as a learning process. So it's your first attempt, so you need to learn to get used to the idea that it won't be perfect the first time and open yourself up for the feedback to improve. Now with the second attempt at learning, this is where you use that feedback from your teacher to improve your writing, and without this you really won't be able to improve and make sure you can pass your actual assessment as well. If you think about a teacher's top tip as well, never bin your writing. Try and improve and rewrite your creative pieces and get used to drafting and editing your writing. And this is also going to help you to track your progress. Sometimes in education it can feel like we're not making progress. So if you were to look back at your work 2, 3 or even 6 months back in the past, I'm sure you'd see that you're making improvements, even if they're only slight improvements at that. Writing task. Use the challenges to write a successful response to the exam question. So the challenge, rewrite the first paragraph using the feedback that we just went through. So you can use the same response that we've just looked at, the same first paragraph, and you can just rewrite it and improve it. Super challenge, if you want, you can access an A3 sheet to help come up with ideas for the rest of the paragraphs. If you want access to that, it will be included in a link below. And then the mega challenge, can you include a balanced argument in your writing? Try and justify your answer. In terms of our next lesson, we'll be going over the following things. So we're going to be looking at another form of writing. We're going to be thinking about how to use higher level language techniques, and you're going to apply your understanding to an exam style question. Now, if you need any additional help or support, the new videos will be added every single week. Alternatively, give us a like and subscribe, leave us a comment, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We've also got our partner channel, Bookworm Teaching, if you need that extra support as well. There's loads of lessons on there that I'm sure you'll find useful. Thanks ever so much for listening, guys, and all the best for your work and revision in the future. Bye bye.